convincing isn't manipulation. It's actually responsible. That's what our discussion here in this video training all about. How do I not come across salesy? How do I convey a point? How do I build my business coaching business and get clients without coming across in a overly hard, salesy way, but I still am able to, gain clients, build a business, and so on, right? And so here's the issue. Most coaches aren't too salesy, actually. Now, there may be times where, out of a heart of really, caring for the individual, that we want to add value and so on, we say to ourselves that we don't want to be salesy, but that's really usually not the issue. The issue is we're too vague, right? In the spirit of attempting to not be salesy, we oftentimes just really don't communicate a whole lot. A lot of vague conversations, and when we're not reading the signals, then we really don't know. And what vagueness does is it actually kills trust. And that trust is killed in the manner that you may think that you're building a relationship with someone where at the end of the day, there actually is no trust because they don't really understand what's going on. And here's why. We've been told, don't be too pushy. We've been told, don't be too salesy. Make sure you add a lot of value. And by the way, I'm a massive fan. As a founding partner with the John Maxwell team many years ago, adding value is a huge part of how I built my own business coaching practices over the years. But here's the twist, that if you never move someone to a clear conviction, okay? If you never move someone to a clear understanding, a clear path to say yes or no, what you're actually doing is you're not serving them, you're hiding. Because there's this idea that, if I'm good enough, then they'll just work with me. By the way, that's the lie that we've been told. We've been told that, look, if you just add value and you prove that you're good enough, you're gonna get business. But that's actually incorrect. That's not what happens. What actually happens when you're doing that in the spirit, we're in the right spirit, the right heart of, not wanting to oversell and do all these different things. You have these great conversations with individuals. You leave, encouraged. They leave encouraged. But what happens? Nothing. That's what happens. Absolutely nothing happens. Here's why. Clarity is not pressure. Clarity is leadership. So what happens when you leave and nothing happens in terms of, you felt good, they felt good, at least you thought you did. What's really going on is that they're leaving confused. Or at least they're leaving in a manner that's not helping them to recognize why they really should make a decision. Certainly if they're attempting to make a decision, or you're attempting to make a decision to work together. In other words, they're going to pay you for one-on-one coaching at some level. And what's happening is you're not convincing them to move forward to solve the problem. So here's what happens. If you can't clearly articulate the problem or a problem, and sometimes, by the way, the problems are both what they understand and already know, like that they have an itch that they're trying to figure out a solution to it, right? There's just how do I get that to go away? And also problems that they can't see at all, like ones that it's like that's what I call in a lot of my trainings the aha moments, when you're conveying something of when you're opening up their mind to a process. That's what a thought leader really is. When you're helping them to see and have aha moments and they go, oh, I didn't realize that. That's super important. So if you can't convey a problem, if you can't convey the cost of someone staying where they are, this is really important. Oftentimes I'll hear from individuals that are, they utilize a process like in our done for you turnkey solution that we call the focus method in our community. There's a part of that where we utilize a sophisticated software that we would call a demonstration. This is what we're going to demonstrate how they can exponentially grow the profits and revenues of the business, okay? So if we don't, in that conversation, show or even talk about, hey, what happens if you're doing $1 million a year, if you're doing $2 million a year, and you got these set of problems and issues that you have, what's the actual cost if you don't fix them and you stay where you are? In other words, if 1 year evolves and is going to evolve whether you want it to or not, and you're at the exact same place and you never move forward, what does that look like from an expense? Not just a financial expense, but just overall life in general. Like, what is the true cost of not moving forward. You've got to clearly articulate that. Then you've got to clearly articulate the path forward. In other words, if they see the problems or they understand them, you've given them some aha moments. It's like, okay, I get that, but then what? And that's what happens. Sometimes when we don't give the path, we don't show them, look, you must walk this path and do this. If you don't do that, then you leave a very foggy scenario, and that's where you're unclear. But oftentimes, we don't know that. But here's the reality. Unclear, when we're unclear, you do not get followed. What that means is they never come back around to saying, yes, I want you to help me with my business when it comes to growth, okay? Next, here's the differences between, at least as far as I'm concerned, salesy and convincing. There is a definition, but oftentimes a lot of people, especially in the coaching space, with the heart and desire to add value and not be overly salesy or whatever, will let others do that, which is true. They think that the two are the same. They are not. Salesy, focused on your outcome, my outcome. In other words, if I'm building the relationship, I needed to get 2 more clients, but just my heart with all these conversations, I'm trying just to get them to say yes, That's focused on your outcome. If you're focused on rushed energy, surface level enthusiasm, in other words, everything is very platitudinal. The energy and the tone that you bring, it's only right here because you're not letting the relationship unfold and go deeper, because that's what a legit relationship does, is you have different levels of it. If you keep it up here, it's just very surface level. Talking more than listening. We talk about this all the time, no pun intended, especially if you're a fan of the DISC assessment. If you're a high I, which a lot of folks in the consultative space are, this is an issue. Whereas you can easily come across super salesy by just not shutting your mouth and letting them talk, listening with empathy where they're at with what's going on and so on. If you have this whole, if your approach is like, let me tell you about my program, like that has a version of coming across salesy, versus when you're sitting down with them and just listening and helping them to, or just collecting where they're at and what's going on and the why. Because even the space that you're taking to do that, the psychological, God wired you, God wired me, and we are wired to be a part of each other. In other words, connection, community. That's the reason why he created Eve. He didn't want Adam to be alone. He being God, that is, as you probably know. And yet, when we're just like, hey, let me tell you about my program, and let me tell you this, and it's just, bam, 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 and there's just no listening to understand, that can be salesy. Here's convincing. When you're focused on their outcome, like legitimately focused on their outcome, and what that can mean sometimes, by the way, and I know this can be frustrating, is timing. Your timing is right now. Like, you want to get the client today, this moment, this second, because that's what we're trying to do. Trying to build a business coaching practice, and we're looking for clients on a consistent basis in most cases, right? But when you're focused on them and their outcome, there can be at times just things that speak into that process that's going to change a lot of different things for their outcome. When you're convincing, you have calm certainty. In other words, you're speaking with authority in a calm manner, and that alone will improve your prominence. People love authority from a convincing perspective. In other words, conviction is the word I'm really looking for. When you have a conviction into your tone in what you're saying and why, it's like, yeah, I get that. Okay, I hear that, right? Precision in your words. This is the reason why. I tell people all the time, study language, study words, study the right words to communicate, to tell a story. Tell a story. Like, Jesus told stories all the time. The parables were the basis of how he communicated his message, right? He didn't just go in and do it. He actually articulated and illustrated stories. So when you're using precision to do that, that's where that conviction and that connection, and that's what helps you to be convincing, which is what's needed, right? Structured demonstration. I mentioned the software that we use to have a demonstration, to demonstrate an outcome of theirs based upon their situation. When you have a structured flow, changes everything. And it removes, this is what I love about what we do. So obviously, that's a, not self-promotion, what's the word I'm looking for? I love it when that happens. Bias, clearly I'm biased, but the tool is doing a significant part of the work because of the structure. And it's taking the pressure off of me having to, be overly, talkative and just convincing from a standpoint of, just believe me kind of thing, right? Which can, by the way, can come across super, super salesy. So salesy pushes, convincing reveals. That reveal is connected to, okay, I see what you're saying. I didn't realize that. Oh, no, I don't want to stay there. But if you're in a salesy environment, you get people to back up a little bit. They're like, oh, yeah, okay, yeah, let me think about that. And, and you run risk of losing the relationship. So if you skip diagnosis and you jump automatically to decision, you can come across salesy. If you skip decision early, sometimes you can sound timid. We don't want to do that, all right? So one of the reasons why we sound salesy is when we're unsure of our own value. See, this is the, you don't have to know everything, but when you know what you know, like, when you look at business growth by itself, all right, there's really, tools change, but the foundational principles of growth don't change. Math doesn't change. You can argue all you want, Common Core math versus, the standard ways, but regardless, 1 + 1 = 2, 2 + 2 = 4, and so on. It will never change. It'd be the same way. Well, growth is pretty much kind of the same thing, right? Like if you're not compelling, probably going to be difficult. If you don't understand how to price your business and the services and products, probably going to be difficult. If you don't understand how to, run a P&L, probably going to be difficult, right? And we're not making any of that up at all. And so when you're unsure, though, of how to communicate, that's where it can create strain on your value. You'll sound salesy when you just need the deal. You'll sound salesy when you're trying to impress rather than diagnosing. You'll sound salesy just by the, I've got watches over here, I've got watches over there, right? And we don't want to do any of those kinds of things. What we want to do is to take a shift in making sure that our demonstration, as we're communicating, adding value in a manner, creates an effective outcome that shows them this is where I'm at, where they're at. If you work on X, Y, and Z, this is where you can be. That's the path, right? That's the clarity. So let me give an example. And it doesn't matter if you do this on your own, if you work with another group of people, if you work with us, you got to have the effective demonstration. You got to be convincing and not salesy. Here's a way to do that. If the business owner is sitting here at $5 million, they're frustrated because they have not been able to get anywhere in the last 3 years. Okay, that happens all the time. And we show them if they work on 1, a compelling offer, 2, communication with their prospects that they have on their list, the people that come in the door, if it's we'll say a retail or whatever, and perhaps how to improve their pricing structure with adding in additional products and services that are complementary to what they already do. Or maybe they already have them, they just don't have them bundled together. So let's just say that here's your $5 million. If you worked on getting a 2 to 5% increase in these few areas, this is what your potential output could be by implementing these things. That is convincing because you show a path forward. And it goes, oh, okay, I can see that now. Because oftentimes they're in the weeds of the business. And that's where we just come in and try to overly explain, get tongue-tied, don't really give any concrete evidence of anything. And that's where you can come across being too salesy, okay? Bottom line, here's the point when it's all said and done. It's your conviction of value, but connected with the ability and have the guts and the heart to say what needs to be said, that most people mistakenly think that that's being salesy by saying the truth. Well, here's a path forward. If you don't do this, you've been here 3 years. What happens if you're here 4? Like, by making a statement like that, you're not being salesy. You are actually being responsible by helping them to think in an area that they really need to spend more time thinking. I've got to take action to do something about this. So when you sit down and you're helping them to see what's possible, you're helping them to recognize the pain points, and you're showing them the path forward, and you're asking the question, what happens if you don't move and get momentum? What are you going to do? You ask that question, you're actually not being as responsible as you could, and that's where the vagueness sets in. That's where just nothing ever happens, it doesn't changes, and so on. Sure, there is some art form to this to some degree. I would just encourage you to put yourself in a position to be a heart forward in their outcomes. I'm going to speak the truth, be candid. Candid and candor does not mean honesty or dishonesty. People will say something like, can I be honest? That's like saying, well, were you going to be dishonest? It really is, can I be candid? That's the word that you're really looking for. Because being candid is telling them what they need to hear that many people may not be telling them, to show them the path forward to solve their problems, to grow their business, that you're not salesy, you're convincing. Hope that adds value to